There is a particular kind of silence that terrifies most people. It's not the silence of a library or the quiet of a sleeping house. It's the silence of an empty side of the bed, the silence of a phone that isn't buzzing, with someone asking, "Where are you?" The silence of a Saturday night with no one to answer to. Most people will do almost anything to escape that silence. They will stay in relationships that drain them. They will chase people who do not want to be caught. They will define their entire worth by whether someone else has chosen them. But 20 centuries ago, a group of philosophers discovered something most of us still haven't learned, that silence is not empty. It is full of the one person you will spend the rest of your life with, yourself. And until you have made peace with that person, no relationship you enter will ever be built on solid ground. This is the Stoic case for staying single, not as a punishment, not as a phase to escape, but as the deliberate forging of the only foundation strong enough to carry real love when it finally comes. By the end of this video, you will understand why Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca all pointed toward the same uncomfortable truth, and why the strongest people, are often the ones who learned to be whole alone first. Welcome back to Wisdom of the Stoics, the place where ancient philosophy meets modern struggle. If you're new here, consider subscribing. Every week, we take the hardest lessons from Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca and turn them into tools you can actually use. Today's lesson might be the one you need most. We are told from childhood that the story isn't finished until there's someone standing next to us. Every fairy tale ends at the wedding. Every movie resolves when the two leads finally kiss. We are taught, subtly and constantly, that an unattached life is an unfinished life, a rough draft waiting for someone else to edit it into meaning. Epictetus, a man who was born a slave and freed into philosophy, warned against exactly this kind of thinking. He taught that the root of nearly all human suffering comes from placing our peace in things outside our control, and nothing is more outside your control than another human being's heart. Think about that for a moment. You cannot control whether someone loves you. You cannot control whether they stay. You cannot control whether they understand you the way you hope to be understood. If your entire sense of completeness depends on someone else's choices, you have handed the keys of your inner life to a person who may lose them, misuse them, or simply walk away with them. This doesn't mean Stoics rejected love. Marcus Aurelius loved his family. Seneca wrote tenderly to friends he missed. The Stoics were not cold men advocating isolation for its own sake. What they rejected was dependence, the quiet, creeping belief that you are not whole until someone else completes you. And here is the part that stings. If you believe you are incomplete without a partner, you will not choose a partner. You will recruit one to fill a hole that was never theirs to fill, and no person, no matter how loving, can permanently patch a hole inside someone else. They will try, they will exhaust themselves trying, and eventually the relationship collapses under the weight of an expectation it was never built to carry. So before we talk about what staying single gives you, we have to be honest about what it takes away. The lie that you are a half person waiting for your other half. The Stoics would tell you, you were never half of anything. You are a whole, unfinished only, in the sense that all virtue is a lifelong project, and that project does not require a witness to be valid. If you've ever felt that pressure, that quiet sense that you're behind because you're single, type the word present in the comments right now. I want to see How many of you are sitting with this exact feeling as you watch? Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire on earth. He had access to anything: companionship, indulgence, distraction without limit. And yet, each night, alone in his tent, on the frontier of war, he wrote to himself, not to a wife, not to a friend, to himself. Meditations, the book we now treasure as one of history's greatest philosophical works, was never meant for us to read. It was Marcus, alone, disciplining his own mind in the only relationship that mattered before any other could function, the relationship with himself. He wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one, not find one to be with you. Be one." The verb is solitary. The transformation is solitary. No one else can sit in the dark with your worst thoughts and talk you down from them. No one else can examine your own prohairesis, your faculty of choice. The one thing, the Stoics said, was truly, unconditionally yours, except you. This is the discipline that staying single makes possible, the uninterrupted practice of self-examination. When you are constantly accountable to another person's schedule, moods, insecurities, and needs, your attention is split. You are managing two inner worlds instead of mastering one. This isn't a criticism of partnership. It's simply the math of attention. A married person, a partnered person, owes real time and real energy to someone else's well-being. That is beautiful. When both people are whole enough to give it freely, it is a slow erosion. When one or both are using the relationship to avoid looking inward at all, ask yourself something uncomfortable. When was the last time you spent an entire evening completely alone, without your phone, without a show playing, in the background, just sitting with your own thoughts? If the answer is, "I can't remember," that's not a coincidence. That's avoidance. And the Stoics would say, gently but firmly, that avoidance always finds you, eventually, usually at 2 a.m., usually next to someone who can't fix what's actually wrong. Epictetus put it even more directly. He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. Solitude, practiced deliberately, is the training ground for exactly this. You learn to find sufficiency in what is already yours, your mind, your discipline, your time, rather than constantly grieving the absence of someone who isn't there yet. This is why every Stoic discipline, the evening review, the morning preparation, the practice of premeditatio malorum, imagining hardship before it arrives, was designed to be done alone. Not because company is bad, but because certain kinds of strength can only be built in private. You cannot borrow someone else's discipline. You cannot outsource your own character. Let's talk about what happens when you skip this stage, when you move from relationship to relationship, or stay trapped inside one relationship without ever doing the internal work that solitude demands. Seneca, writing to his friend Lucilius, observed something that still describes us perfectly 2,000 years later. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. Apply that to relationships, and the translation is brutal. It is not the person who is alone who is lacking. It is the person who cannot stand to be alone who reveals the deepest poverty. Think about the people you know who jump from partner to partner with almost no gap in between. The moment one relationship ends, another begins within weeks. On the surface, it looks like resilience. Wow, they bounced back fast. But the Stoics would ask a harder question. Bounced back to what? If you never sat in the wreckage long enough to understand why it happened, you didn't heal. You just changed the scenery around the same unresolved wound. This is the cost of rushing. You carry your unexamined self into every new relationship, and that self makes the same choices, triggers the same patterns, and eventually produces the same outcome, just with a different name attached to it. Picture someone, anyone really, because this pattern is everywhere, who grew up feeling unseen by a parent. They never address it. They never sit with it. Instead, they find a partner who finally makes them feel seen, and they marry that feeling, not the person. Years later, the partner is still a separate human being with their own moods, their own bad days, their own moments of distraction, and the unhealed person interprets every single one of those normal human moments as abandonment. The relationship doesn't fail because the partner was wrong. It fails because the foundation was never solid ground. It was a desperate need. Wearing the costume of love, staying single, practiced with intention rather than bitterness, interrupts this cycle. It forces you to face the unseen child, the unhealed wound, the unexamined fear, without a partner there to numb it. That is uncomfortable. That is, frankly, why most people avoid it. But Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The discomfort of solitude is not a sign you're doing it wrong. It is the friction of actual growth. If you've ever caught yourself repeating the same relationship pattern with a different person, comment the word pattern below. And if this video is hitting harder than you expected, that's exactly the sign you should keep watching. So what exactly does this season of being single build if done with intention? First, self-sufficiency. The Stoics called this autarkeia, the state of needing nothing outside yourself for your peace of mind. This doesn't mean you reject help or connection. It means your baseline state isn't dependent on it. A self-sufficient person enjoys companionship as an addition to an already full life, not as the only thing keeping that life from collapsing. Second, clarity of values. When you are not constantly negotiating your time, your space, and your decisions with a partner, you discover, often for the first time, as an adult, what you actually want, undiluted by compromise. You learn your own rhythms. You learn what kind of work fulfills you, what kind of friendships nourish you, what kind of mornings make you feel alive. This clarity becomes priceless later because it lets you recognize with real precision whether a future partner aligns with a life you've actually built rather than a life you're improvising around them. Third, emotional regulation. Premeditatio malorum, the practice of imagining loss and hardship in advance, is far easier to do honestly when you are not emotionally entangled in daily highs and lows. With another person, alone, you can examine fear, jealousy, anger, and grief at their root without a partner's presence, either soothing them prematurely or triggering them constantly. You become the kind of person who can sit with difficult emotions instead of needing someone else to absorb them for you. And paradoxically, this is exactly the quality that makes someone a phenomenal partner later, because they no longer need their partner to regulate them. They've already learned to do it themselves. Fourth, and this is the one most people miss, discernment. Oikeos is the Stoic concept of expanding concern outward from the self to others only works. In the right order, you must first understand and govern yourself before you can wisely extend yourself to someone else, a person who has never been alone long enough to know their own mind will, almost without exception, choose partners poorly, not out of bad luck, but because they don't yet know what they're choosing for. Solitude, done right, sharpens your eye. You stop mistaking intensity for compatibility. You stop confusing chemistry with character. You start recognizing real virtue in another person because you've spent enough time identifying it or its absence in yourself. None of this means solitude is comfortable. It isn't. There will be nights it feels like punishment instead of practice. But Seneca wrote, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. The very discomfort of being alone with yourself is the resistance training of character. Skip it, and you stay weak in exactly the place you'll need strength most. Inside a future relationship, when things get hard and there's no one left to blame but the unexamined parts of yourself. Now, an important correction, because this philosophy is often misquoted into something colder than it was ever meant to be. The Stoics never said solitude was the goal. They said it was the forge. A sword is not made to stay in the fire. It is made to be drawn from it, tempered, sharpened, and finally useful in the world. Marcus Aurelius himself loved deeply. His correspondence shows real grief, real tenderness, real attachment to the people in his life. The goal was never to feel nothing for others. The goal was to feel deeply without being enslaved by the need for it. This is the crucial distinction. Staying single by intention to build yourself is wisdom. Staying single by fear to avoid ever being hurt again is a different thing entirely, and the Stoics would call that out too. Avoiding love because you're afraid of loss is not virtue. It's just a quieter form of the same fear that makes other people chase love desperately. Both are still being governed by fear, not by reason. The aim of this season, single, deliberate, internally focused, is to eventually meet another person from a place of fullness rather than hunger. Not, I need you to be okay, but I am already okay, and I choose to build something further with you. That single shift changes the entire chemistry of a relationship. It removes desperation. It removes the silent resentment of feeling like you gave up parts of yourself you never actually examined. It allows two whole people to create something neither could create alone, instead of two incomplete people hoping the other person's presence will quietly finish the job. So if you are single right now and it stings, I want you to hear this clearly. This is not your punishment. This is your preparation. Every evening you spend examining your own mind instead of someone else's mood is an evening invested in the only relationship you will have for your entire life, the one with yourself. And every bit of peace, discipline, and clarity you build now is something no future partner will ever be able to take from you because you didn't borrow it, you built it. Before we close, here is something practical, because the Stoics were not theorists, they were practitioners. Tonight, try this. Sit alone for 10 minutes with no phone and ask yourself 3 questions. What am I avoiding feeling by staying busy or distracted? What pattern have I repeated in past relationships that I have never actually named? And what would I want my life to look like? If no one else's opinion of me mattered at all, you don't need answers. Immediately, Epictetus didn't ask for instant mastery. He asked for consistent practice. Do this once, and it's an exercise. Do it nightly, and it becomes the foundation. Marcus Aurelius spent his entire life building in that tent, alone, by candlelight, becoming the kind of man worth being. Staying single is not the absence of a love story. It is the first chapter of the only love story that makes every other one possible, the one where you finally, deliberately, become someone worth choosing and someone capable of choosing well in return. The Stoics didn't fear the silence of an empty room. They filled it with the only work that ever truly mattered, the slow, unglamorous, lifelong construction of character. And when love eventually arrived, for them it arrived as an addition to a life already whole, not a rescue from a life that wasn't. If this video gave you a new way to see your own solitude, don't let it end here. Hit like so this reaches the people who need to hear it tonight. Subscribe to Wisdom of the Stoics if you want more of this ancient wisdom applied to the life you're actually living. And in the comments, tell me, what is one thing you've learned about yourself only because you were alone long enough to face it? Until next time, stay disciplined, stay grounded, and remember, you were never half of anything.